Baby, you are so sweet. In the darkness, the man's hoarse magnetic voice burrowed into Maria's ear. The woman knelt at the edge of the bed, her hands bound by belts, her eyes covered with black ribbons. After she was deprived of Vicin, the senses of the body became more sensitive, and she shrank as her body felt the pain. In the darkness, she could only feel his wanton plundering behind her and the tone of his ecstasy. Well, change your posture, his voice rang in her ears. Maria opened her eyes suddenly. A cold sweat ran through her body. She covered her hot cheeks and then moved to the pounding of her heart. 5 years had passed. Why was she still having this dreaming? This dream was the only thing that is stopping her from forgetting her piano. She got up and went to the bathroom to pour cold water on her face. And the cool liquid made her instantly awake. She went downstairs so as to pour herself a glass of water. But that she was so thirsty. I don't want to marry that old pervert. She heard someone scream. The third son of the McCarthy family is now a shrinked old man. Not because of his age, but because of what he went through years ago. Now even with his wealth, no woman in the country wants to be with him. Someone would have not mind if he had not scared 2 of his wife to death lately. 5 years ago he was burned, disfigured, and then his heart twisted again. I heard he played 2 women to death. I don't want to marry him. In the living room, a sharp female voice came like she was crying. Maria knew whom that voice was for, but she stayed calm to know what this problem is all about. Then she heard her name. Besides, if you really need to marry anyone to that old disfigured man, Maria should be in the best position to marry him. Anyway, she is not a pure flower girl anymore. She has already even given birth to a child. She is more experienced than I am. There is no loss for her to marry that old ugly pervert. She rushed out. Catherine! Their father Jacob Flair shouted at her, "Do you realize that Maria is your sister?" He was already angry at what Kathy said about Maria. Not that they didn't know the circumstances that surrounds her child, and now she decided to mock her with it. Kathy gritted her teeth, and her voice shook because she was already full of tears. Dad, am I not your own daughter too? Why then want to sacrifice poor me who hasn't seen anything in relationship? But Maria, who already is a wild child before now, and does whatever pleases her, you want to keep. I am the one who always have to sacrifice all for the sake of this family. I lived for 18 years of poverty and destitution. It wasn't easy for me at all, and now that I have my own career, you want to force me to marry that burnt man. I won't allow this. Not this time, she shouted. I won't allow you to force her. It should be a choice, not by force, Sandra Flair said in agreement with Kathy. Sandra wasn't Maria's real mother, but she is the one that gave birth to Kathy. Even she wasn't willing for her daughter to marry the burnt third McCarthy son. Sandra Flair on the side also hurriedly said, "Of the truth, Kathy has become famous in the business world, and she is the glory of our family. How can we sacrifice her?" Jacob Flair looked at his wife. Not that he didn't expect her to say that. Of course he did, that she always favored her daughter over all. Besides, we've been raising a child for 23 years, and she should repay us. Sandra added. Maria was adopted that the Flair family needed a child. Since then, she has been part of the family. Sandra was the first one to tell Maria that they weren't her true parent, and that was when what happened to her happened. None believed her story except her father, who against all odds stood by her. Jacob looked at Maria's room direction, just to make sure she is not there listening, but then he saw her standing on the stairs looking at them. This made him to gasp and feel sad. His sad face made the rest to look at the direction, and they saw Maria there. Maria's knuckles went white, but that she held the rails really tight. She understood everything that was happening. She knew how her father's business has been doing lately, and what he needed for it to survive. She understood that for her father to get what he wanted from the McCarthy family, a marriage has been proposed between those two. But Kathy's mother didn't want to sacrifice her daughter, but she wanted to sacrifice her. She took a deep breath, went downstairs, and held out her hand toward her father. "Contract," she said softly. Jacob was quite puzzled. She didn't know if Maria heard all they were discussing, or just little, so he decided to play dumb for a while. "What? Contract? Let me marry into the McCarthy family instead of Kathy. And let me use that to repay the nurturing grace of the Flair family," she said, with a pale smile. Jacob shook his head. "You don't have to do this, Maria," he said pitifully. "You deserve my sacrifice," Maria said. "There must have been a contract drawn right. Otherwise, if you use this nurturing grace to force me to kill people and set fires, I do the same," she said. Jacob was stunned for a moment. Both Sandra and Kathy, who was behind him, were equally stunned. None knew she would agree to do such. They were still planning on how to tell Jacob to force her. "You don't have to do this," Jacob said again. To Maria, Jacob is a good man, and he is worth any sacrifice she does for him. She then looked at the paper that was lying on the table. She took it before Jacob noticed that she wants to take it. Maria took the paper and pen, signed the contract agreement in her name, and then dropped it back on the table. "Now it is all done. Debt paid." After saying that, she went to do what she initially came downstairs for, which is to get the water, and she returned upstairs. Kathy rushed over and picked up the paper. It then was clearly stated that Maria is now married to Xavier McCarthy. This was quite unbelievable. Kathy looked up at Maria's retreating back as she went upstairs and murmured, "Mom, is Maria stupid? She just promised to marry that burnt man and not want her boyfriend anymore." Sandra hurriedly covered Kathy's mouth and looked up in the direction of Maria, being that she is afraid that Maria would repent of her action. Maria actually heard what Kathy said. She then laughed bitterly. What Kathy didn't know is that she didn't even have the boyfriend anymore. 2 days ago, she and the guy whom she had trusted with all her heart and had thought, despite her having a child, had loved her with the whole of his heart with another woman. She who had been in love with him for 6 years and was willing to give her all to him. But now it is not possible anymore. It is not that she really wished to do what she did, but she knew no matter how she tried, this is all coming back to her. All she just avoided was a waste of time and pleading. She zeroed her mind that this was her payment for the debt they owed the Flair family. Whomever she married doesn't mean. It is just a different person and place. All she just avoided was a waste of time and pleading. She zeroed her mind that this was her payment for the debt they owed the Flair family. Whomever she married doesn't mean. It is just a different person and place. Tend. Wend. T. 3 days later, Maria was taken to the McCarthy family. She didn't even have a proper marriage like the rest would. She wasn't angry at this, knowing the kind of man she agreed to marry. The other party did not directly obtain a license from her, but asked her to live in the villa of the McCarthy family first, and then make a decision. If she would stay or not, it was after her decision that their real marriage certificate will be signed. Not even one of the ladies who volunteered to marry the burnt old man were able to stay. When they see him, they run for their lives. That is why it was said that he almost killed them. It was rumor that said they died. Jacob's only word to Maria was that she must please the third son of the McCarthy family. Being that he is the sole owner of the McCarthy empire, he is the only one that can order them to have investment in his company. Maria then promised to stay and please him. Maria didn't see her husband, but then she was directed to her room. She sat quietly in the bedroom, waiting patiently for the man to come. She was having over 1,000 thoughts about how the man's appearance would be. She knew she had to endure everything that he would do to her. Snap! At that sound, the entire villa instantly went dark, and the power went out. Maria's body trembled instinctively. She is afraid of the dark. After that night 5 years ago, she no longer dared to face the darkness alone. And even when she slept, She had to turn on a small nightlight at the edge of the bed to feel at ease. Now, in this strange environment, she was already a little frightened. And the power was blackout again. The woman subconsciously hugged her knees, shivering in the darkness. She was trying so hard not to cry. She was too frightened. She didn't even notice that the door to the room was opened. She already closed her eyes, hoping for the worst. Then in the darkness, something rubbed her feet and covered her hands. Something sticky and cold rubbed on Maria's hand. Maria's face suddenly went pale, and the blood on her body seemed to coagulate. She didn't want to scream, but the thing kept moving on her body. Then a scream escaped her throat. Her body jerked back, her back landing on the soft bed. If not that she hasn't climbed the bed fully before the light was out, she would have definitely hit her head on the bed frame, and that would surely be painful. She began to think what could be that would touch her like that. At first she thought if they have a snake as a pet in the house. She hated snakes, but feeling the roughness of the thing, she knew it wasn't a snake. She couldn't help but to wonder what it was. In the darkness, the unknown creature crawled towards her again, and she began to cry. "Please don't kill me," she pleaded. A hoarse and rough voice like a broken wooden door opening sounded. "Wife, my wife. It is I, your husband." "Huh?" Maria couldn't help but to say. Then pop, the sound of lights coming up came, and suddenly the dark room was all lightened up in an instant. Maria finally saw clearly the thing that touched her. A man with a terrible face, and the man was her husband. To Maria, this can't be called a person. He was looking shrew, like a dwarf, and even his hands and feet were black, and he couldn't distinguish his joints. The man, wrapped in a bathrobe, was lying on the edge of the bed, looking at her with those black hole eyes. And that face of his, it can no longer be called a face. His face is crisscrossed with various scars, and his facial features are distorted, like a demon crawling out of hell. Maria couldn't help but get scared. Even though Maria had prepared herself mentally for this before, she still instinctively screamed out loud when she looked at this inhuman and ghostly thing in front of her. Even the demons she sees on television are more better than this monster, right in front of her. The man laughed hesitantly. "Wife, what is your name? Are you afraid of me?" He just asked a stupid question. He could see her trembling so hard, and he dares to ask if she is afraid. "But you promised to marry me." Maria is going crazy with fear. She knew she promised Tori him, but she didn't promise to marry a monster. She has this feeling that he could be a bloodsucker. If she stays, he would suck her blood. She crawled out of bed in a panic, trembling and running outside, not daring to look back at the man again. Poor Maria panicked and didn't even notice that her leg hit the flower pot in the corridor and bled out. Ha 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 ha. Watching Maria's figure disappear into the corridor, the man on the bed climbed down from inside the bathrobe, took off his gloves and mask, and it revealed a white and cute little bun-faced boy. "If you want to be my mommy, there is no door." He got out of bed and ran excitedly to the little study. "Brother, I scared one more," he said, laughing. In the little study, another little boy who looked exactly like him sat down under the lamp with his head bowed. He was reading a book. Liam was not happy with what his twin brother did, and sat down on the small chair looking at him gloomily. "Can you at least care more about Daddy? He obviously avoiding contacts with women, and you know Grandpa has to go through the stress of arranging a fiancé for him. And this is the third." The little boy raised his eyebrows faintly, and the small face that is not more than a palm was looking like a mature one. "His actions doesn't match his age at all." He said, "Well, I am also watching about for Daddy. I don't want a bad woman who wouldn't be able to take care of him to come here," Lexi said nonchalantly. Liam couldn't say anything. He just looked at his brother. The twins were with a super high IQ. They are always cold to people, and their words were like gold, and like their daddy. They are stuffy gourds, but one is quite understanding and accommodating than another. They might have many similarities, but Liam is more calm than Lexi. Lexi flattened his lips, and then ran to the large study on the third floor, and pushed the door in with a small body. "Mr. Xavier McCarthy, your third fiancé is not very good," he mocked. The man sitting on swiveling black chair wore a white shirt which has a silver cufflinks dazzling, revealing a steel watch with a very manly taste. He was looking down at the document, his features deep and elegant in silhouette. After reading the page, he lightly ordered, "Tomorrow, recover the funds given to Swede Sweets." "Yes, sir." The butler, whom he happens to be talking to, bowed his head and said respectfully. After saying that, he hesitated, wanting to tell his boss something. "Sir, forgive me for talking too much. I think this Miss Flare this time. It is not the same as the previous two," he finally said. During the day, it was the housekeeper who brought Maria in. He then was watching her colossal. He thinks she would react like the previous two when they walked in and saw the mansion they walked into. But Maria, her face is white and her eyes are clear. She has no fascinated reaction when she first glanced at the mansion. And this made the housekeeper think her to be a likable and different girl. From the Flare family house to the McCarthy's mansion, she said very little along the way, and the only few words she said were to ask the housekeeper what the third son of the McCarthy whom she is getting married to likes, and what he doesn't like. It seems that she did not pay attention to the rumors outside. This gladdens the heart of the housekeeper, since the news that the two young masters had jointly spread, that the third son's ugly appearance and tyrannical personality had killed two women, since it was really difficult for the big master McCarthy to find his grandson a wife. So such woman as Maria, who was not afraid of the third son of the McCarthy and wanted to do her best to serve the third son of the was difficult to find with a lantern. This made the housekeeper to think Maria was worth a trial. The man sitting on his chair didn't think so. Even such a simple test she can't pass, so there is no need for any pity party here, he said bluntly. The butler was dumbfounded at how he said simple test, as if it was really simple. "Sir, is this a simple test? The outfit that the little young master made, even a full-grown man in his prime would get frightened if he sees it, not to mention a little woman in her 20s. Women are fragile in nature. It is not a bad thing to be sacred," he defended. The housekeeper sighed. Even him, if he didn't know about that plan, would have been scared to death with that mask. He was really unhappy because if things keep going this way, his master would end up being single for the rest of his life. At this time, the doorbell rang downstairs. Maria trembled and rang the doorbell at the door. She was really frightened, and it was still in her body because her body still shook. Not because of the cold outside, but because of what she saw. In fact, she ran out a long way. She didn't know how many distance she had covered before she came back to her senses. Originally afraid of the dark, and then she saw the monster that appeared out of nowhere, the moment the light came up. And her heart was full of fear, but now her fear already reduced. She felt that she should not run away. From the very beginning, she knew that Xavier McCarthy is an ugly monster, with a psychological distortion after being burned. Since she agreed to the marriage, she should keep her promise and should not flee from her responsibility. She is responsible for what she signed. She then sat down somewhere to think. She knew she can't return back home. It would be trouble there. So after a long hesitation, she finally returned to the McCarthy's mansion. When she pressed the doorbell with a miserable white face, her heart was still beat wildly. She didn't dare to face the person she is to be sleeping beside every night. She knew that she had to overcome it, because in the future she would have to live with him for a long time. The doorbell rang for a moment, and the door opened. Unexpectedly, it wasn't her fiancé, or the butler or a servant that opened the door for her, but a handsome and indifferent little boy who looked only 4 or 5 years old that did. If it weren't for the fact that there was only one villa in the neighborhood, Maria would definitely think that she had gone wrong into the wrong house. The little boy took a look at Maria and turned into the living room. He pointed to the position of the sofa and signaled to Maria to come sit down. Maria pursed her lips, although she didn't know where this little boy came from. She knew that this little guy had no malice against her. For him to tell her to sit, he definitely knew she would be there. She sat down on the couch in a huff, and the little boy poured her a cup of hot coffee without saying any word to her. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at the boy. She held the cup of cough 6, and her mood gradually calmed down. She could feel the hotness of the coffee in her hand, and it then warmed her body. She didn't even think of the heater that was in the room. The little boy glanced at her and walked over to the small cabinet beside him, rummaging through something. Wow! On the railings on the second floor, the small bun that had previously frightened Maria widened his eyes and looked at the scene downstairs. She actually came back. He didn't believe she would be back after what she saw. No one will ever see a monster and return to such place. "Daddy, do you want me to scare her again?" he asked. The tall and fierce man stood in the shadows, glanced at the small woman who had shrunk into a ball downstairs, and then looked at his son who was digging out the first aid box downstairs. And his brow frowned slightly. "Don't," he replied the boy. He knew any more stunt can give the dainty woman an heart stop, and he wasn't ready for that. He had too much to do that to start running about over a strange lady. Outsiders only know that Xavier McCarthy was involved in a fire accident 5 years ago. That was very severe. Being that they didn't see him appear in front of people, they concluded that the fire had destroyed him. None knew that he was reduced before it could destroy him as they think. Most that spoke with him on phone noticed the change in his character. So they concluded that his personality became strange and fierce because of the incident. Only few people knows that after the fire 5 years ago, he had a pair of twin sons. The eldest son, Liam, who was just 5 minutes earlier, has always been cold and does not like to talk. And the second son, Lexi, is mischievous and eccentric. But at this moment, Liam, who is always being cold to people, is now pouring coffee and looking for first aid for a strange woman. This seems very unusual. Sizzle. Maria made that sound when the cotton swab dipped in cold disinfectant water touched the wound on her ankle. Maria found out that she had just run too fast and did not know that she already hurt her ankle. Talk more of she knowing when. It was until the little boy brought the first aid and told her to put her leg on the table so he could help her treat it that she saw the dried blood on her leg. Sizzle. Maria made that sound when the cotton swab dipped in cold disinfectant water touched the wound on her ankle. Maria found out that she had just run too fast and did not know that she already hurt her ankle. Talk more of she knowing when. It was until the little boy brought the first aid and told her to put her leg on the table so he could help her treat it that she saw the dried blood on her leg. She bowed her head, and the little boy in front of her was holding the disinfectant with one hand while he used the other hand seriously disinfecting her. The huge light in the living room shone on his long upturned eyelashes, casting a small shadow on his eyelids. Maria couldn't help but to think. Such a small little guy, but the mind is so kind. They might be strangers, but he was taking care of her wound. Maria's heart warmed, and even her voice softened. "Little friend, what is your name?" she couldn't help but ask. She wanted to know this little one who was treating her real good. The little guy detoxified her and stuck a band-aid on her broken wound. "Liam," he replied when Maria already thought he wouldn't. When he was done with all this, he looked up at Maria. "I'll tell the butler to get you something to eat so you could use some drugs to avoid you having fever," he said. "Thank you." Maria said, and looked at his cute little face and small hands, and couldn't help but want to reach out and touch him. But she was cleverly dodged by the little guy, and this made her smile. Such a smart one, she thought. Liam then returned the first aid item's eye to it, his box, and walked over to the couch across from her, climbed up, and sat down. He then continued reading his book, with a certain maturity that didn't match his age in those clear eyes. He looked at her after a while. "Why come back?" Maria smiled. "Because this is my future home," she replied. The little one raised his brow at her, like he seemed surprised. Maria understood his looks, so she explained herself the more. "President Xavier will be my husband in the future, and of course I will come back." Little Liam looked down and fiddled with his tiny fingers. "Aren't you afraid?" Most people he knew were always afraid of the little stunt his twin brother do pull, and they would never return. But her returning was showing some sort of courage. Maria paused. She didn't know how this little child knows so much, but yet she replied. "He has been kind to her, and to know her gratitude is to reply all his questions. Afraid is an understatement. I am terrified. But since I promised to marry President Xavier, I can't regret it. It is better for me to endure than break a promise." "That would hurt more," she said with a stiff smile. She was not a person who escaped from things. She is used to facing her troubles. That is her motivation, and besides, if she messed things up this time, Jacob wouldn't be able to get that investment, and her future life would not be better. President Xavier, even if he is ugly and terrible, I will try to overcome it and be his wife well. She didn't know why she was saying this to this little guy whom she is meeting for the first time, and he probably couldn't understand the whole thing that is happening, or what she was saying. But in this strange place, except for the small guy in front of her, it seemed that she had no one to talk to, and he a very kind one. Talking to him relieved her fear. He is not ugly. Liam raised his head, and those eyes looked at Maria seriously. "You can be rest assured." Maria looked at him strangely. She didn't say a thing or argue with him, but she battled with her thought. "Isn't that ugly?" she asked herself. How would he say that the monster she saw not too long ago isn't ugly? However, given that this is a small child seated before her, perhaps President Xavier might not have dared to show his true face in front of this little one, in case he scared death into the guy. She took a deep breath and smiled at him. "Are you hungry? I can make you something to eat," she said. Maria didn't know what else to say, and she didn't want to feel ill. Then she decided to make herself acquainted to her new home. She loves to cook, and she has no specialty in particular, and cooking is very delicious. Most people that tasted it always praise her for her delicious hands. In the face of such a handsome and heartwarming little guy, the only way she could think of to thank him and get closer was to make him food. Little Liam looked at her and said coolly, "You still have half an hour." Maria didn't understand what he meant. "Huh," she said, "I can't eat after 8 o'clock, and now it is already 7:20, he said. Maria felt so happy that he didn't decline her from cooking him food. The butler had showed her around a little when she came, so she knew her way to the kitchen. She then flew into the kitchen. The kitchen is clean and tidy, although there are not many ingredients, but there are still some recipes she should make use of there. As she cooked, she wondered why the kitchen is not fully stocked. Money isn't their problem, and they have people who could do it. Looking at her busy figure in the kitchen, the large and small figures upstairs talked in low tones. "Daddy, what does she mean by going into the kitchen? Is she cooking herself a meal?" Lexi asked with a frown. "I think she wants to cook for your brother," Xavier replied. His voice was so plain, without any expression. Little Lexi was resting on the railing muttering, "Isn't this your new wife to be funny? She is trying to use food to please my brother. Isn't she thinking too much? Wait till she finds out that my brother is a notoriously picky when it comes to food," he said with mockery. Xavier looked at Maria, his eyes slightly deep. The woman right in his home gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Maria was busy in the kitchen for 20 minutes, making a Japanese omelette rice and then making a few pieces of cheese and potato cakes, and brought them to the table steaming. "Little Liam, come and eat," she called with a satisfying smile. Liam glanced at the time, and it was 15 minutes before 8 o'clock. He still had time, so he jumped off the couch, walked gracefully over with his short legs, and sat down at the table. Liam frowned at her. "Don't call me little," he said with a cold voice. Maria wasn't angry at his tone. She just nodded her head. Upstairs, Lexi wiped the saliva from the corners of his mouth. The aroma of the food already filled the whole room, and this made Lexi a little jealous. "Although it smells quite nice, it doesn't look delicious, and I am sure it won't taste delicious. Liam will soon reject it," he criticized, as if he heard what his brother said upstairs. Liam, after he had a taste from the food in front of him, came to a conclusion in a soft voice. "Delicious," he said. Maria smiled and squinted. She didn't know if the little one is a choosy one, so she had doubt about him liking it, but with his words now she felt delighted. "I am glad you like it. I'll make you more meals in the future if you are still." "Here," she said. Liam looked at her and wondered where he was going when this is his father's house. After saying that, she suddenly remembered something. "By the way, you are here so late. What about your family?" she asked. "Are you the child of President Xavier's friend?" she asked when he didn't reply her. Before getting married, she hadn't heard that Xavier has a child. Talk more of him having children. The little guy frowned and nodded. "Sort of," he replied, knowing if he didn't reply her she might continue to question him. Maria nodded lightly. "I didn't expect that President Xavier, even though he is a little ugly, he might have a kind heart," she said softly. At the very least, his friend's child was at his home as if he were in his own home, which proved that President Xavier is not as violent as the rumors has pasted him. He is not ugly. Liam swallowed the bite he took from his meal, and then reminded in a low voice. "Maria seems moved at how the little bot defended his father's friend. Even though the boy wasn't giving her a smile, he sure knows how to be good." Upstairs, Xavier looked faintly at the little guy beside him who already was drooling, and it drew a smile from his face. Lexi was looking so intensely at how his brother was taking every bite. "You can go downstairs if you really want," Xavier said to him. Lexi was a proud one, so he shook his head quickly. Xavier wondered the character of his two sons, one who tried his best to maintain his noble appearance, and the one who wanted everyone to think his father is a monster. Not that Xavier was the one who told Lexi to pull such stunt, but he never scolded him. He just let him do as he wills. Liam flattened, his mouth aggrieved. "Dad, you understand me, right?" he asked, and didn't wait for him to reply. "I just don't want a stranger to be my mommy," he said sadly. Xavier could understand the boy quite well. He didn't want anyone that would treat them bad to come into their home, and he isn't blaming him for that. Well, since he doesn't care about those females, he didn't bother to explain how things is to his son. He then touched his head slightly and gave him an understanding look before he walked away. Downstairs, Liam finished eating, and it was already 8 o'clock. He had ate carefully and with so much dignity. Maria smiled, thinking the boy was well taught, seeing how he ate with discipline. "Can you get me extra meal?" Liam asked. Maria didn't ask any question. She just went to bring him more. Liam stood up after his meal and started to walk away with the extra food in his little hand. "Do you need any help?" she asked, wondering where he is taking the meal to, since he said he doesn't eat anything past 8 p.m. Liam shook his head without even looking back. "You should go to bed early," Maria said softly. He didn't say anything. He just kept going, and when he walked up to the last staircase, he turned his head to look at Maria, who was still standing dazedly in the same place, and said coolly with an indifferent look, "You must be tired. Go to bed early. Later, I'll come cover you up." Although he was small, it was difficult to hide his noble and arrogant temperament. And when he looked back at her, his eyes did not look domineering like a 5-year-old child, but like that of a grown-up. Maria was stunned for a moment. After a moment, she looked at his little back and gave a confused smile. She didn't know whether to smile or to cry. Even if she has some difficulty adapting to this environment, it is not the turn of a small child of this age to cover her. She should be the one covering him. Turning around, Maria began to clean up the kitchen and dining room, and when everything was cleaned, she did not dare to go back to the horrible bedroom before. The scene that happened there couldn't help her leg to move. The scene kept replaying in her mind. After much conclusion, she decided to settle down for the living room's couch. She sighed and lay down on the couch, covering herself with her coat. At the children's room upstairs, Liam placed the food he brought on the head of the Lexi's bed. The little guy faced the wall, leaving Liam with a cold back. "I don't eat," he said harshly. "Oh." Liam put the plate on Lexi's bedside again. Lexi looked at him in anger. He flattened his mouth and began to mutter, "Didn't we just join forces, that we won't let strange women be our mommy? You mutinied so quickly, traitor." Lexi spitted. Liam sat back on his cot and glanced at his brother's back. "She cooks delicious meals. Cooking is delicious and not our mommy," Lexi said angrily. He stared at the picture, hung on the wall with his little finger. "I want my biological mother. Biological," Lexi cried. Liam sighed on the opposite bed. He looked at the ceiling and silently spoke, "But our own mother dead," he reminded him. He was more mature than his brother, so it was clear that his biological mother would not be able to come back again. "Daddy shouldn't be single for the rest of his life because we don't want a stranger for a mother." "The one downstairs, not bad," Liam said softly. "She is not dead." Lexi's small hand clenched into a fist. "Mommy is definitely still alive, waiting for us to find her," he argued. Liam closed his eyes and ignored him. The children's room was suddenly quiet, and the aroma of food was wafting in the air. Finally, the little guy got up from his bed, tiptoed, and carefully reached the head of his brother's bed, picked up the fork and took part of the food and ate it. At the moment it got to his mouth, the little guy's bright eyes instantly lit up. "It is delicious," he exclaimed in a whisper. "It is 10 times better than the meals cooked by the domestic servants." "Is she a chef?" Lexi couldn't help question himself. "Make sure to send the plate down." When Liam ate the second fork from the food, the childish voice of Liam, who was lying on the bed, sounded. "Also, don't scare her in the future," he added. Lexi looked at him and flattened his lips. "Brother, you are very abnormal." In the past, Liam's pranks on him were all in a state of love and ignorance. How could he actually start defending that woman he met today? "Is it because what she made a meal that is delicious?" he asked himself. With this in mind, he took a sharp bite of the meal, and it was delicious indeed. After finishing the food, Lexi went downstairs to deliver the plate to the kitchen. Coming down from the upper floor, he glanced at the woman lying asleep on the couch. She was curled up and still shivering. He wondered why she didn't go to the bedroom to sleep. He then walked over and looked at her clean white face. "She looks good, and then her cooking is very delicious. If only she were to be his biological mother, thing would have been more easy." In her sleep, Maria felt a gaze staring at her. She woke up suddenly, and in front of her was the little guy from before. At the moment, he was carrying the plate and looking at her fixedly. She rubbed her sleepy eyes. "You haven't eaten enough. You should have just walked me and not stand there," she said, sitting up. Lexi pursed his lips, knowing that she had mistaken him and his brother. But he nodded anyway. He really wasn't full. He wanted more of that delicious meal. Looking at the handsome and cute little face of the little guy, Maria's heart was fastened and filled with joy. She then raised her hand and pinched his little face gently. This time, he didn't avoid her hand. "This aunt will do it for you again." After saying that, as she entered the kitchen, she also slandered in her heart. Didn't he say that he would not eat after 8 o'clock? And he has eaten a lot before. Maria simply cooked him a light meal suitable for children, so that he won't get indigestion. The little guy ate it clean, and Maria was stunned. This child's appetite, isn't it a little too big? Especially when the little guy in front of her handed her the bowl and asked her to add more food. She was surprised, but yet didn't deny him more food. When he finished eating, Maria finally couldn't help but speak. "Little." She then remembered that he had told her not to call him little. Liam, do you feel your appetite is a little big?" she asked carefully. Lexi shook his head, and then the gluttonous boy laughed. "Yes, I can eat very well," he said with pride. Maria noticed something was quite different from the boy he saw earlier than the boy that came down now, even if they are the same. Then she stupidly thought that the child was hungry earlier. Lexi held out his 2 tender fingers. "You'll make food for me later. I want double portions." After saying that, he thought about it, afraid that his brother would leave him with something unpalatable, so he stressed, "Make 2 identical portions." Maria was a little shocked, but still nodded, smiling and putting away the tableware he had eaten. "I understand. You are such a big child. You want to grow a body," she said, smiling. She found the boy's attitude quite cute. She then remembered that she brought a gift. She looked into her little handbag and then handed Lexi the gift she had prepared for her husband-to-be. It was a box of cookies she had made by herself. "For you." After saying that, she raised her hand and rubbed the little guy's head with a smile. "You are going to grow tall and handsome." Lexi blushed and quickly went upstairs with the biscuit. He was quite happy. Maria took a deep breath, smiled, and then returned to the sofa to continue to sleep. She was very tired, so she didn't even take a minute before she fell asleep again. "You are going to grow tall and handsome." Lexi blushed and quickly went upstairs with the biscuit. He was quite happy. Maria took a deep breath, smiled, and then returned to the sofa to continue to sleep. She was very tired, so she didn't even take a minute before she fell asleep again. Upstairs. The extravagant and expensive phone shook twice on the table. The man's large, slender finger picked up the phone and clicked the answer button. "Pass." Lexi's little voice came out of the receiver while he was eating the biscuit. No one need to tell Xavier what his son was talking about. He already understood what he meant. "Pass it for the time being. I actually don't like her," he said bluntly. "But her cooking is so delicious that I was going to compromise once for the sake of my stomach," he said. And then ended the call. Xavier sailed another number on his phone. The person on the other end answered immediately as if he was expecting the call. "Get the license arranged by tomorrow," he said, and dropped his phone. 10. The next morning, Maria was woken up by the housekeeper. The housekeeper was kind-hearted, and she had seen it yesterday when she first arrived. At this time, the housekeeper was standing in front of her carrying a very formal set of dress. "Ma'am, how did you fall asleep here?" he asked. Maria was still trying to stay awake. "Hurry up and clean up. The people from the Civil Affairs Bureau will come right away," he said when he saw that she was still sleepy. Maria rubbed her aching eyebrows. She didn't sleep well last night, and her head was still groggy. She frowned and looked at the housekeeper confusedly. "The people of the Civil Affairs Bureau?" she asked. "Yes." The butler looked at her with a smile. He was quite happy for her. He didn't think that his mater would see her as an eligible candidate. "Congratulations on passing the test. The third master is ready to get a certificate with yuan from the signing." "You are the madam," here he said with a bright smile. Maria suddenly woke up. This news came too sudden. She looked at the housekeeper in shock. "Are you sure that President Xavier wants to marry me?" Last night, as soon as she saw him, she was so frightened that she fled. It must have really embarrassed him. How then could he possibly want to marry her? She had thought she would have to plead with him for her misconduct yesterday. But now the story is different. "Yes, ma'am. You shouldn't be surprised. The third master has thought this out well." Maria was quite surprised. She didn't think he is a very thoughtful one. They had only met for few minutes last night, and he had decided to marry her. That seems quite sloppy. Well, be that it may, President Xavier's willingness to marry her is really good news. At least she didn't fail on this one. Firstly, the Flair family can have what they've been looking for. And secondly, even if President Xavier looked terrible, she at least had a home she could call hers. And that alone is peace of mind. Ever since Kathy returned to the Flairs' house 5 years ago, it has stopped to being her home. By the time she was done getting dressed, the officials from the Civil Affairs Bureau were already seated waiting for her. The two officials let Maria stand in the living room to take a photo, and then she signed the marriage consent form, and under the guidance of the housekeeper. Then, the form was also taken upstairs for President Xavier to sign by the housekeeper, and 2 officials from the Civil Affairs Bureau. Not long after, the 3 of them came downstairs and handed a red marriage certificate to Maria. "Congratulations! You are Mrs. McCarthy," the leading official, who handed her the certificate, said with a bright smile. "Thank you," Maria said, returning the smile. The female staff official even held Maria's hand with envy. "Congratulations, ma'am. You have found a very handsome husband," she said. The muscles on Maria's face twitched. "A very handsome husband?" she asked herself. She almost snorted at her words, but then she heard herself and gave her a smile. Then she subconsciously opened the marriage certificate to see if the picture he put there was the one before the fire accident. In there was, female, Maria Flair, male, Xavier McCarthy. Originally, it was supposed to be a couple's photo, but only a photo of Maria was there. She then breathed a long sigh of relief. She then thought that President Xavier was quite understanding and did not put his photo on the marriage certificate. Otherwise, Maria felt that she might not have the courage to touch the certificate again in her lifetime. It would have been too heartbreaking and scary. "Madam, you should prepare." The butler smiled widely. "For?" Maria asked. She didn't know what she had to prepare for again. She already wedded to him, and that was all. "Tonight is the first night between you and your newly wedded husband, and as a tradition in the Carthy family, it must be made memorable. So you must be very ready to meet the third master's majestic wind," he said with a sheepish smile. To Maria, meeting her husband again got her heart pumping. She was really scared of that man, but what could she do? She just nodded at the butler's words. "I will leave with everyone in the house, and there will only be 2 people left in the villa, which is you and the third master, your husband." Maria, whose heart she was trying to relax, instantly fell to the bottom at that news, and then picked a more higher rate to pump. She just wished she wouldn't have a heart stop. She couldn't help not to think about the hand that touched her yesterday. It was quite sticky, cold, and disgusting. She did wish to have it touch her again. She grimaced. "Do we have to do that tonight?" It was too sudden. She wasn't ready. She hadn't adapted to her newly wedded husband's face and body. The butler nodded seriously. "Yeah, it must be tonight. They are now married. and tonight they must let the lady know the true face of the man she married. How will it be done, if not them being together? It took the housekeeper a lot of effort to convince his master not to wear a mask tonight, but to let Madame to see his true face. He wasn't ready to make Maria avoid the night. Maria became a little hot when she knew she can't avoid this night. Her body couldn't help but to shake. After breakfast, she hid in her room and sent a message to her friend Amelia. Recommend me a few horror movies to practice courage. Thank you. Amelia then texted back. I've never heard of such an excessive request. Amelia too was aware of whom she wants to go get married to so as to help a friend. All kinds of horror films in ancient and modern English, and abroad rushed Maria's mailbox. Maria fell into the quilt, watched a whole day of horror movies. As she watched, she kept going to the bathroom to vomit several times. She is not a lover of horror movies, and now that she is seeing one is making her stomach twitching. If this movie could make her like this, she then thought of how a real-life horror will make her feel. She prayed for courage, so as not to faint. When it got dark at night, she felt that she had been refined into steel. She felt courageous, even if her husband, President Xavier, appeared in front of her now. She had nothing to fear. So she went downstairs to take a sip of water, turned on the television, and planned to watch today's news to change her mood. After watching for a whole day, horror movies, her heart was not feeling so well. The headline, just now, Chris Baton and Belinda Saxon were photographed going in and out of the hotel together, and the reporter quickly contacted the brokerage companies of both sides, which gave proof that they were indeed in love, and their engagement date would soon be announced. That was the first thing Maria heard from the news. Maria saw those two people on the television screen, and there was some physical discomfort. She turned the channel away with the remote control. Chris Baton and Belinda Saxon are both the hot characters of this year's Golden Bull Awards. They were awarded for Movie Queen and Movie King. And now they've suddenly made their love affair open to the world. Now, there is a high probability that career love will be double harvested. Maria changed the channel again and again. The 2 more times. Finally, Maria turned off the television, threw the remote control to another side of the sofa. She then laid tiredly on the sofa and closed her eyes, but she couldn't stop seeing Chris Baton and Belinda Saxon. One was her ex-boyfriend, which she had loved for 6 years, and the other was a good friend, whom she had known and trysted for 8 years. 5 days ago, Maria went to Chris's lounge, not telling him about her coming because she wanted to surprise him. But then she was the one who got surprised. As she opened Chris's lounge with the spare key, what she heard was the messy breathing of the two people. She knew what this meant instantly. She decided to leave quietly. But then, a very recognizable voice stopped her. "Baby, when will you break up with Maria? I can't wait anymore. Sooner or later." "What is the hurry? Maria looks so beautiful. I am afraid you'll change your mind." "Well, how could I change my mind? She had given birth to someone else's child 5 years ago. To me, she is such a dirty woman. How then could I possibly marry her?" Chris and Belinda's words, every word, was like a spike fiercely stuck in Maria's heart. Then she remembered the big mistake she did all for love 5 years ago. Chris Baton encountered a low point in his career and was madly smeared by his family. This pained Maria because Chris was really sad and helpless. She then was looking for evidence to clear Chris's name, while also trying to raise money to fight this battle hard for Chris. At that time, Kathy just returned to the Flair's house. Jacob Flair and his wife did not pay attention to Maria, but to Kathy. She then thought it not good enough to ask them for such money, so she went to Belinda for help. Belinda, not having enough, found her a way to make money. She then called it keeping some lonely people company. Belinda didn't explain what that meant to Maria, and Maria, who was so desperate to help her boyfriend, didn't even ask in details. To Maria, she trusted Belinda and didn't think she would do her evil. She even thought what she wanted to do was just read books to some lonely old folk or sick one. When she got to the place, she didn't see lonely person. She had her doubt because the place didn't look like an hospital. It was looking more like a condo, but Belinda assured that there was no problem. Few minutes later, the light was off and a man in the darkness tormented her for a whole day and a night. Afterward, she got the money and successfully cleared Chris's name and sent him to a high position. She even forgave Belinda for what she did because she pleaded she didn't know that was what was going to be done with her. But then she couldn't forget that day. 5 years later, when Chris finally became the top of the entertainment industry, he turned around and hooked up with her friend Belinda. Now hearing both of them saying she is dirty really pained her to the bone marrow. She knew he was angry at her, that she carried another man's child, but he said he didn't mind since she did it for him. But now he seems to have mind that already gone issue. Her life became like this all because him. Lying on the sofa, Maria's tears fell like a pouring rain. She had loved Chris Baton for 6 years and didn't mind what happened to her because of him. How many 6 years in a woman's life can be spent like this? Her previous years was filled with disappointment. Ruminating on this, she cried continually for 2 full hours. Finally, she decided to stop crying and glanced at the time. It was already more than 9 o'clock in the evening. Her new husband hasn't arrived yet. He should be coming, right? She asked herself. Maria sniffed, and her eyes fell on the wine cabinet in the living room. Inside the wine cabinet, there were all kinds of wines that she didn't know. Maria couldn't actually drink, but at the moment, what she needed most is to get high and forget all her troubles. A drunken solution to 1,000 sorrows. As soon as she got to the wine cabinet, she took a bottle of wine, opened it, and drank it straight from the bottle, not even looking at what kind of wine it was. The pungent liquid entered her throat, and she cried as she drank. "Chris Baton, you bastard!" she shouted. The wine was already getting into her head, and she didn't know if she was shouting or musing her words. "You are so happy on your award, when I am the one who made this possible for you, and you dare call me a dirt," she said drunkenly. "You are such an ingrate. Even my husband, who is ugly, is far handsome than you are. You are the real beast here," she yelled. Outside the door, the man who was holding the key to open the door had a slight pause in his hand. Xavier McCarthy had a calm face as he opened the door. Entering the room, he saw a room full of wine. On the coffee table, there were several bottles of wine that he had treasured for many years, each worth millions. At this moment, the bottle of wine was completely empty. A certain little woman was slumped on the sofa. Her cheeks were crimson, and she was cursing a man and occasionally mentioning my husband. The place was a total mess. There was a hint of displeasure on the man's face outlined coldly. She just got a marriage license with him, and the original form was already given. And now the woman he promised himself to is a drunkard. Hearing the noise coming from the door, Maria turned her head with a drunken burp. "Who are you?" Fascinated. She had already lost her senses, and when she caught a glimpse of someone coming in at the door, she got up and greeted her. This is a man. High nose, thin lips, and sword eyebrows. Lines as cold as a knife, is a very handsome man. As handsome as her Chris. No, he is Chris, she said to herself. He dared to appear in front of her. Maria flattened her lips, angrily, raised her hand, and wanted to slap the face of the person whom she thought to be her ex-boyfriend. Chris, but her wrist was caught by the man standing. Xavier's cold eyes had a hint of sadness in them. "How much have you drunk?" Her body was soft and squishy, and she stood unsteadily after being held by him, shaking her head. "I didn't drink." After saying that, she simply threw herself up and wrapped her arms around Xavier's waist. "Chris, I miss you so much," she cried. She blushed, like a young girl who had just fallen in love, and shouted softly but sadness. "Chris, Don't you think I am dirty? I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't know. The woman's tears, through the thin fabric of his shirt, wet his lean waist. Xavier frowned. His face was even colder than the weather on a thunderstorm day. He looked down at her. At this moment, the woman's small hand was tightly clasping his waist, delicate and lovely. However, her loving eyes looked at him, that small red mouth, but shouted another man's name. He was angry because he is married to this woman, and yet another man is in her heart. How then would he be able to trust this woman with his life? Xavier stretched out his hand, picked up the woman, and strode upstairs. In the bathtub of the upstairs bathroom, there was hot water prepared by Maria for Xavier. By this time, the water was already bone-chilling. Drunk and unconscious, Maria was thrown directly into the bathtub. The white t-shirt on her body clings to her body after the water, outlining her graceful figure. Even though the water in the bathtub was already cold, Xavier still felt a pull of heat in his body because of her. He actually hates women. Ever since the event that happened 5 years ago, he had instinctively resented women. No woman could touch him, not even his sister. He felt irritated by them. He was glad he didn't have a female child because he wouldn't want to hate his own child. However, today, being held and hugged by Maria, a little drunkard, he did not feel disgusted at all. What his body wanted was to merge with her and enjoy every bit. It is so cold. In the bathtub, the little woman shrank. She drank too much spirits, and the cold water not only did not wake her up, but made her more arrogant. Chris. Maria laid softly in the bathtub, delicately shouting Chris's name. I am so cold, she said. She reached out and pulled at Chris's pant legs. I know you don't like me anymore, but please, I am Vold. Are you okay if you would help me? The woman's eyes were confused. Her little face was flushed, and she looked at him like a child. Is it okay for you to take me out of this water? I am so cold and cold. Her tail note was picked up, like a touch of chocolate shreds across Xavier's heart. He hadn't felt this way in a long time. He didn't even know why he is feeling like this for this strange woman. He then reluctantly have to admit and agree with his housekeeper that Maria is very different. However, she was still shouting at the man named Chris. Xavier wanted to know the man who got the little woman this way. The man squatted down and clasped her jaw with one hand. Who am I? He asked. Maria pursed her lips. You are Chris Baton. In her intoxicated eyes, there was only Chris Baton. The man frowned dangerously and raised his hand directly to press her head into the bathtub. The biting cold water surrounded her head, but she still couldn't find her senses, and the whole person fluttered helplessly in the bathtub. Halfway through, he let go, those cold eyes staring at her. Who am I? He asked again. Chris Baton. Why are you? Dipped her into the bathtub. Again, Maria choked back tears, and she looked at him with tearful eyes. She didn't know why Chris was trying to kill her. If you don't want me, that didn't mean you should want to kill me, she said, shaking. You have to know who I am, Xavier said coldly. Maria looked at him. Her eyes wasn't still cleared. Then you say, who are you? She said. Xavier raised his hand and rubbed her lustrous lips. Call me husband. The drunk little woman didn't think twice before she concurred at his words. Husband, she called softly. This sound of husband made Xavier feel the impulse that he had been missing for a long time again. Maria stretched out her hand and held his face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Don't let me soak in cold water anymore. I've called you husband. You can't bully me. Xavier looked at his drunken, crying wife. She might be drunk but so attractive in her drunken state. She was looking so delicate, like a rose flower that shouldn't be trampled upon. The man looked at her, his voice low. Little drunkard, do you know what bullying is? Maria's pure white, Confused eyes looked at him and shook his head like a bairn. The man's voice was dull. Then, I'll teach you. Just as he said that, there then, as one more person in the bathtub. Hi, Khan. The next day, harsh sunlight shines through the window glass. The curtains were pulled open all over, and by the floor-to-ceiling window stood a man who was turning his back on her, looking out the window. The man is tall, and a single back is permeated with lazy honor and arrogance. Maria was woke up from her sleep with an headache. The bright light in the room wasn't helping matters at all. Last night she had a very wild dream. She actually took a mandarin duck bath with a big handsome guy on her wedding night, and successfully sent her husband a piece of green grassland. Everything in her dream felt so real that she tasted every bit of it in her tongue and felt it on her body. She then slowly opened her eyes. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw an unknown man's cold back turned to her. Maria almost got a heart attack. She stuttered when she talked. You? Who are you? How come there is a man in her room? This room is supposed to be hers and her new husband, and now this unknown man is standing there. No, she is not making this silly mistake again. Not in her life. This man was tall and didn't even show any sign of burnt on his body. Even if this man standing was a shadow, she knew that it was definitely not the man she felt married to. Not President Xavier. Who is that? She asked herself. Did she really spend the night with her husband last night? She really didn't even know how she got up here. She couldn't even remember anything, but she remembered she drank a lot of wine. Hearing the shocked voice of the woman behind him, Xavier raised his brows and turned his head to look at her. You are not allowed to drink alcohol in the future, he said firmly. She drank in millions last night. Because of her now, he needs to spend a lot of millions just to stuff his wine cabinet back. Even if he didn't care about the money, he was sad about the out-of-print that he had tossed and turned. Having said that, he looked at her for the last time and left indifferently. Maria was shocked on the bed and half dazed. She remembered that last night she was very sad because she saw the news of Chris and Belinda, so she drank some wine. Well, lot of wine. Afterward, Maria looked at herself and saw the bruises and scars on her body and wanted to cry, but there was no tears. Last night was her and her new husband's wedding night, and not only did she not wait for her husband, but she was also in her husband's house and was given to a stranger. Those rumors about President Xavier's brutality all instantly burrowed into her eardrums. Maria could even help but to predict that in the future, she would definitely die a miserable death from the hands of the man. The man Xavier, who almost ate her up last night, was still there looking at her with a firm look and giving her orders that she is not allowed to drink alcohol in the future. He was saying it as if he was commanding his silly child. Don't you ever dare to drink alcohol again, lady. Not on your life, he said firmly. As he spoke, Maria's hangover was just slamming her head as if it was been hit by sledgehammer. She didn't even dare talk because of her headache bit. Then she couldn't help but to think, who the hell is that man? The man before her just walk away without another words. She has been a bad drinker right from time and yesterday. None need to tell her that she drank to stupor. Just as she was thinking of what to do to her headache, while clutching her head in chagrin, she heard someone knocking slightly on her door. The person was been careful not to be loud. Come in, she said. Well, she was wrong about the person being careful. Not to be loud because it was little Liam that walked in dressed in his blue pajamas. Looking at him approach her bed with his little cute face, she wondered what he wanted. His eyes didn't show that he just woke up. But he was looking at her with a frown. Is this child hungry this early morning? She asked herself. Looking at the way he ate yesterday, he shouldn't be feeling hungry this morning. Maria looked at the walk clock and realized it isn't early morning at all. It almost 10 a.m. She widened her eyes at how long she has slept on her first day as a married woman. Maria almost jumped down from the bed, but then she looked at herself and realized behind that quilt, there is nothing more. She gave the child an apology look and dragged the quilt with her to her dresser. That didn't do too much than to put on a gown that was a little above her knees and a scarf to cover her neck, to go attend to the child. She had thought the child came to throw a tantrum by. Then she was also wrong. The boy only came to check on their new mother. He didn't even mind about food. But Maria took his hand and went to the kitchen. "I am sorry, I slept for so long." "I won't be late," she said softly. Little Liam almost chuckled at her thinking. "Does this woman think me to be a foodie?" he said in his heart, but then he didn't stop her. She placed him on the counter and continued her business. Liam was watching her every move. He remembered the pink mark on her body when he walked in. None need to tell him they are bite marks. He is sure too smart to know that. What he just kept wondering about is if his father wants to eat his bride up. He then thought it to be another way to punish her for coming back to become his wife. Well, that is reasonable enough since his father didn't want any woman in his life. He hates them. He then noticed that he has bruises on her knuckles too. It looked like it has been taken care of, but then he is a child. He was still thinking when he noticed that Maria was limping a little. He then remembered she had an injury yesterday, but now the injury looks wider. He got more angry. Did his father force a woman? They both went to the dining room after Maria served him his meal and an extra one which he asked for. Liam couldn't help but to keep looking at Maria instead of eating with that his black eyes and fair skin that made him look so cute. With the little cute guy looking at her like that, Maria's heart melted that she blushed slightly. She just met this little one and he is already making her feel welcome. "What is wrong, darling?" She bent down to ask him in a very soft voice. Her thought was that the child must want something for him to be staring at her. Like that. Children are always like that. Liam raised his little fair hand and pointed at her leg. "Don't rest on that leg. It will hurt more," he said. Maria smiled widely. The boy is such an affectionate one. Liam got down from where he was seated and went to bring the first aid box. Initially what he wanted to ask Maria was if those pink marks he saw on her were hurting her, but then he thought against it that she is a lady and might feel so embarrassed. Seeing the boy come back with the first aid box, Maria smiled. Liam put it on the table and wanted to open it. But she stopped him. "I'll do it myself," she said softly. Liam looked at her. "It is fine, darling. Eat before your food starts to get cold." "I'll do this," she said with a sweet smile. Liam then nodded and went back to his food. Maria wanted to take the box away from the dining room, but the little cute boy wouldn't let her. He asked her to stay. It wasn't as if he was pleading. Then she chuckled at his pride. He was watching her every move as she opened the box and started to clean her wound. As she did her thing, she didn't know that the little scarf she used to cover the hickey on her neck was loosened already. As Liam eats, he kept staring at the neck. The little one then thought he needs to speak with his father so he won't hurt her next time. Liam thought that he didn't know his father do eat human flesh. Maria, while she treated her leg, was secretly wondering who the man she woke up to see is. She felt like to ask Liam if they have any grown man living in the house aside them, but then she thought against it that if anyone finds out she slept with another man, she would be kicked out of this house. But she couldn't help but curse the man who invaded her matrimonial home and did what he did. He didn't even do it silently. He made sure to leave a lot of mark on her body. What if her husband finds out? Would he believe that she was drunk or would just blame her, like her family and friends did when what happened to her happened? This thought brought emotions to Maria. Her heart heavies, but then she need to be strong. She can't break down in front of the little boy. She knew how emotional kids can be. She also didn't know how she got all the injury on her knuckles and leg. She knew she drank but then blacked out afterwards. "All done," she said, wearing her slippers back. "And the mark On your neck. Maria was speechless. She didn't know how he got to know about the mark on her neck. She then touched it and discovered that the scarf she placed on it is now lowered. Is it painful? He asked. Liam knew that the one on her leg and hand would definitely hurt. But the one on her neck, he didn't know since it didn't look like a wound. Maria gave a very embarrassed smile. She was equally afraid that if the little one get to know that it is not his uncle that did that, he might not like her anymore. Because of her shame, she couldn't talk. She just shook her head. Liam wondered why his stepmom is blushing at that little question. Are you lying? He asked, looking at her neck. He felt, because it is pink. It should hurt. No, I am not. It is just pink, and it would return back to normal in hours. She replied. Liam seemed not to believe her. He thought she is just defending his father. Don't worry, I'll scold him for you, he said, with a serious look. Maria just nodded at the boy's cuteness. He is already watching out for her. Then a maid approached. Madam, I was cleaning your room. Then your phone couldn't stop ringing, she said. Thank you, Maria said, collecting her phone. Amelia's anxious voice came out of the receiver. Maria, since you are married now, can you make out time to come by at the studio? There are a lot of roles to be played today. Even the manager said that there is one person who is asking after you, she shouted. Maria twisted her eyebrows, wondering what Amelia's excitement is all about and who is the person asking after her. I'll be there right away, she replied. When Maria and Chris were so much in love, been that Chris is just an upcoming and wasn't ready for scandals with anyone. So to avoid any suspicion and the want to see him every day, Chris suggested that she become a stuntman at Chris's studio, which she gladly agreed. People at the studio were quite surprised that she put in for the stuntman part, been that she is a female. Not that it is prohibited for females, but then it is quite a hard job, and that is why, among the stunt actors, the martial arts stand and earned the most. So Maria resolutely did the martial arts. It seems like a 2-win for her. She would get to see the man she loved every day and also earn money. As the only female warrior in their studio, Maria was very popular. This wasn't her initial dream. She wanted to be a very good chef, a one with a nice restaurant, but then she wanted to secure her future with Chris Patton first before she move on with her own career. How stupid. Now Chris has left her for her friend. Auntie is going to work, Liam asked. Maria was already standing up when Liam asked the question. She then nodded quickly and went to head to her room to go change. Don't go. The little fellow hurried out of his chair and stood in front of her with his little hands outstretched like a little eagle. You are hurt. You need rest. His voice was childish, but then it carries a touch of domineering and concerned tone. The amount of care Maria has received from this little one, just in few days they've met, she didn't think she had received it in years. Her heart was slightly warm. She squatted down to rub Liam's small head affectionately. This little injury is nothing to Auntie. She smiled. She was a martial arts stand-in, and such injuries were drizzle. She has experienced worse. No, he gritted his teeth, and Liam bit his lip and opened his small hand toward Maria cussedly. He wasn't ready to let her leave. Darling, even if Auntie is hurt, anyone has to work else she would lose her job, she explained. Liam looked at her for a few seconds before he said, Give me 5 minutes. Maria gave him a quizzical look. She was wondering why he needed the 5 minutes. It won't take more than 5 minutes, Liam said. Okay, Maria agreed. She can still spare him 5 minutes. The little one breathed a sigh of relief, took out his mobile phone, and sent a quick short message to his twin. Upstairs, Lexi, dressed in the same blue pajamas as Liam, quickly pushed open the door of the study. Daddy, I have something to ask you for help. Thang Wayne, Sangbai, time passes minute by minute. Maria smiled and looked at the little guy seated in front of her and couldn't help but to wonder what he is planning to do. Darling, you said 5 minutes and it is 4 minutes now. It is just 1 minute left. You know you can't stop your auntie from going to work? Liam nodded seriously. Just when there was only 30 seconds, thereabout left in the 5 minutes. Then, Maria's mobile phone rang. Baby girl, quit getting dressed. You don't have to go to work today. Amelia's voice was full of excitement. The studio is on holiday today, she added. Maria was stunned. Holiday. Baby girl, quit getting dressed. You don't have to go to work today. Amelia's voice was full of excitement. The studio is on holiday today, she added. Maria was stunned. Holiday. Yes, there was happiness in Amelia's voice. Maria knew she would have been jumping for joy. It is said that there is a billionaire who doesn't want his wife to work, so he directly let all the crews of the whole studio take a day off, she explained. Sigh. Rich people are willful, she said jealously. Maria held her phone tightly since she was still very much in shock. She didn't know how that was possible, just in 5 minutes, as if the little boy has a genie that did that magically. The efficiency of the studio is excellent, and since she went to work in the studio, there hasn't been a day for holiday there. Now he has made an exception and taken a vacation for the wife of this big man. Really? Wayward, clueless Maria said. She didn't even think that the wife of the billionaire spoken of could be her. She helplessly put down the phone. Auntie's not going to work anymore, she said with a disappointed look. It was as if she had seen the red bills fly away from her eyes. Auntie doesn't need to work anyway, he shrugs. She watched as the little boy seated before her flashed a hint of pride in his eyes. She still didn't think it is his handwork. Well, he is quite too small to pull such stunt, and then her husband who could. She didn't think he would do that for her. She hasn't even seen him since they were married. It is still morning. The little guy coughed solemnly and looked at her since she was deep in thought. Go have to breakfast. Oh, she said, unable to go to work to earn money. Maria obediently went to the kitchen to get herself breakfast. By the time she came back, Liam wasn't at the table anymore. She looked up and saw him put his hands in his pockets and coolly went upstairs. I have something to do, he said. With that, the little guy turned and went upstairs. But after taking few steps, he turned back again and looked at Maria. Thanks for the meal. Maria was amused by him. He is a little one, but then he knows how to be appreciative. TSK, you asked me to make you 2 breakfasts, and you only ate 1. It seems you don't fancy today's meal, she joked. Liam's body froze slightly. He seems to have forgotten about his brother's food. Lexi was still shy to come down with him. He didn't want her to know yet that they are twins. After a moment, he spoke somewhat awkwardly. I'll be back to eat it, just keep it warm. As he said that, he strode upstairs. Not long after Liam went up, Lexi, his brother with a messed up hair, rushed downstairs. Breakfast, he said happily. He rushed over and sat down at the table, boasting as he ate. This is quite delicious, he said. Maria was stunned. How did this child go upstairs a different person and came back a different person? The boy he just attended to didn't have his hair tousled like this. He wasn't even this active. She then began to wonder if the child has more than one personality. This was really baffling. While Maria prepared herself for the worst, the family she entered seemed not to be balanced in one way or the other. But then she is already into it. She can't move out. Sayi. At the study upstairs, the noble and indifferent man is at work. Little Liam pushed the door open and walked in. Xavier didn't mind looking up since he knew it is none but one his kids. They are the one who always come in without permission. The small body climbed onto the chair and then from the chair to the desk. Finally, he sat down gracefully on his desk and folded his arms. making a straight face. "President McCarthy," he called. The cold and arrogant man stopped the hand that was tapping on the keyboard, then looked at the little boy that chose to call him officially inside of Daddy. He definitely knows something was up with him. Liam didn't say anything. He just glared at his father, still folding his arms. Xavier too relaxed his back and folded his arms in same manner, waiting for what his son is bringing, the two looking very familiar. "Do you care to explain why your newly wedded wife is all pink all over with marks of bite on her?" "Were you planning on eating her?" Liam asked firmly. Xavier frowned. "Did you barge on her?" he asked with a scolding voice. Liam shook his head. He wasn't fazed by his father's firm voice. He thinks he is more angry than him. "She let me in. Moreover, I just saw her neck and shoulder, so I then know it would definitely be all over her," he said. Xavier sighed. His children are very smart one. He didn't want them to be seeing a naked woman in their little age. He knew it would register in their head. "Do you care to explain?" His son's firm voice came again. Xavier tried not to smile, so as not to make his little boy, who is playing a hero here, feel awkward. Looking at the boy, he said, "Didn't you ask me to marry her?" Then the husband just did what he should do to his wife. How then does he have to be explaining himself? His voice was full of pride. "But then do you have to eat her?" Liam asked, not satisfied with his reply. Xavier shrugs. "Did you suddenly turn to her knight in shining armor?" Xavier asked. Whatever Liam said, just like his father. "I am watching you," he threatened. Liam topped a shrunken version of Xavier's face, looking at him without fear. His voice was childish, but domineering. "The person who hurt his wife don't need to explain." Father and son, in the same posture, the same face, one sitting in a chair and the other sitting on a desk, facing each other and looking into each other's eyes. His son was taking side of a woman he barely knows. What then is so special about her that made him so attached quickly? "Are you scolding your father for a stranger? Daddy always behaved well. Why then? Not now." Xavier decided to put his pride down and explain things to his son. He can be as stubborn as he is. He then unfolded his arms and rest his hands on the desk. His son was seated. "I didn't hurt her. You'll understand better when you grow up," he said in a soft voice. Liam stared at him for a while. But he calmed down. He released his folded arms. "Just be gentle," he said firmly. Xavier nodded. "Promise." Just as he wanted to reply him, there was a knock. "Sir." The housekeeper called. "Come in." Xavier's voice, that was already calm for his son, became strict again, and he sat up straight. The housekeeper walked in. Xavier looked at him to talk. "The acquisition contract of the studio has been sent to you two." Before he could finish speaking, two pairs of obsidian-like eyes looked at the butler together. Two voices, one big and one small, sounded, "Get out." He was quite speechless when this happened. He weakly glanced at the two, father and son in front of him, and lowered his voice. Don't you dare talk," Liam warned him coldly. Looking at the little child's stern face, the housekeeper bowed and left. He wondered what is going on between those two. Since those kids have been wise enough to differentiate things, he would always leave them to do what they want. He never tried to come between them and their father. He was curious but patient. He is the closet to the kids after their father. Liam would surely come to tell him what transcended between them, especially if their father didn't give them what they wanted. Liam's small brow frowned at his father, even if he understand that this is a husband and wife's thing. But what about her bruised hands and legs? Being that Liam didn't want to call his father a liar, he jumped down from the table and marched out grudgingly. By the time he was out, he met the butler still there. "Did you see what happened?" he asked. The butler didn't seem to understand him quite well. "Sir," he asked, "last night, everyone in the house was taken to another villa to go sleep. Even him and Lexi, but then Liam didn't know if the butler stayed behind because he didn't see him till he fell asleep." "Were you here last night?" Liam asked again. The butler too has seen Maria's hands, so he quickly understood what the little boy was trying to find out. The butler coughed softly. "Young Master Liam, come with me, since most the building and the house do have CCTV in them." The butler led Liam to the CCTV room to see if they would be able to see what really happened yesternight. The housekeeper searched out yesterday's surveillance of the corridor. In the video, Maria, who was only wrapped in a bath towel, stumbled out of the bedroom. It was quite easy to tell that she was drunk. She couldn't even tell the directions and spun around in the same place. Then suddenly, she turned left, hitting her leg on the huge vase, turned right, and hit the decorative cabinet on the side. The woman grinned in pain. Even Liam and the butler made painful faces as they were the one hitting the objects. But then, she still insisted on continuing her walk. Just as she hit the pillar, she shouted at it and started to fight it, giving it blow as if it is a person. The butler and Liam exchanged look, and Liam began to feel guilty for accusing his father. Under the high-definition camera, Liam clearly saw Maria's arms and legs, and the bruises left behind when he hit the flower pot. Soon Xavier, who was wearing pajamas, appeared. He stood at a distance, folded his arms, was watching her indifferently. When she finally decided to stop fighting the pillar and move to her next target, which is a close window, that was when Xavier got up and carried her back to the room. Little Liam looked at the video quite stunned. He didn't know a drunken state of a woman could be this strong. She was hurting herself and didn't feel it. Seeing the injuries on Maria's body this morning, he had thought that his father, who had never touched a woman, had, because of anger, suddenly become violent. "I didn't expect that this was the case," Liam said. "I didn't expect that this was the case," Liam said. He was really feeling like a bad child for accusing his father. "Young master, you see that the injury on Madam's hands is not caused by your daddy?" The butler sighed faintly. "It is because his wife is quite drunk," he added. Liam pursed his lips, his face a little hanging, but he still gave a serious glance at the tall man standing in the doorway. They were aware that Xavier was standing there all the while, but none focused on him. As if he knew his son was going to come here. "Then you are also at fault," he said to his father. "Why did you watch her hit that pillar and didn't stop her, knowing she is drunk?" Xavier opened his mouth indifferently. "Have you found out that in the wine cabinet downstairs, there are a few bottles of top-level limited wine?" Liam's face turned white. He definitely knew what his father meant by that. His father does not like to socialize and does not like women. His life is an extremely disciplined one. By then, in addition to work, his biggest hobby is to collect some famous wines to put at home. The wine in the wine cabinet downstairs, each bottle is not cheap at all, and no one dares to go there. The little guy bit his lip as if thinking of something. He knew what trouble his father's newly wedded wife is. This he cannot save her from, so he decided to excuse himself quickly. "I still have something to do. I'll be leaving now," he said, and start to walk away. But the Xavier stopped his small body from escaping. "Didn't you just declared yourself a knight in shining armor, eh? You were the one who said that." Liam snapped and pouted. Xavier squatted and looked into his small eyes. A man should be responsible for his own words and meaning. Denial is cowardice. Liam didn't even know what to say. He didn't want to look weak, so he decided to coerce him. "Daddy, she is your wife, and what you own she own," he said with a blunt face. "No, little guy. She is the woman you chose for your daddy. She is your responsibility. Any crime she commits, you face the consequences, else she is gone." he said with a firm look. Liam looked at him crestfallen. He knew a couldn't defeat his big, intelligent father. Mr. Xavier McCarthy, you are so rich. Do you still want to blackmail your son into giving his little money? He asked. Xavier gave an indifferent look, which means he doesn't care. The little guy took out his mobile phone very painfully, then went to his mobile bank app. Your account details, he said with huge grudge in his heart. Xavier called it out for him, and Liam transferred $15,000 to Xavier's account. Installment payment. You can forward to me the remaining balance. After saying that, he brushed off Xavier's hand, and his little short leg ran away quickly. The butler looked at Liam's blue back with stunned eyes. Liam never give anyone anything without a reason. Talk more of him sacrificing his whole allowance for a woman whom he knew and deserves whatever punishment his boss want to give to her. Sir, it seems like you've not only gotten yourself a wife, but also the mother of your children. He said with enthusiasm. Xavier nodded slightly, looking at the direction his son left. His eyes dark, said, "What, dude? Why did you transfer my pocket money to Daddy?" In the children's room, Lexi received an alert of transfer on his phone. At first he didn't believe it. His brother almost emptied their joint account. Lexi was confused because their father never needed the money. Have you forgotten that we are gathering that money to buy collections of scientific equipments? Now, you've just shattered our dreams, Lexi ranted. Liam sat on his bed and crossed his legs gracefully. He sure know that his brother is going to nag him about the money. Daddy made me give it to him, he replied casually. Not that he too was happy about the money, but he didn't want his father to have any excuse to send his new wife away. Did he found out about our plan? Lexi asked scared. Liam shook his head. Then why give him our money? He is so rich. He doesn't need it. He frowned. He said if I don't give him, he would drive our new mommy away. He replied. After saying that, Liam looked at Lexi with a sad face. But then Lexi seemed not to care. And so, it is his wife, Lexi snapped. You don't care? But then you will never eat the food she cooked again. Didn't you say it is super delicious that you want to eat it every day? Liam was intentionally blackmailing his brother with food. He knows he is a foodie and can't joke with his stomach no matter what it may be. Lexi felt caught. He knew his brother said the truth. Once their father sent his new wife away, no good food again. He was even planning to make her sneak to his room brownies so that he would eat them while he play his game or read. All right, he gave up. Scientific equipments or something, their father already promised to get them when they are old enough and safe for them to handle. Of course, food is more important than anything else. He needs to save his new beautiful cook. How much is Daddy demanding for? Little Lexi sure knows that his father won't ask for $15,000. He is a billionaire, and few dollars can't make him heed to them. He is. Don't tell me it is in billions, because we are going to pay it for the rest of our lives. Lexi rushed out. I don't know, but then she drank his wine. Isn't Daddy's wine is too expensive? Lexi looked alarmed. Nebula sighed and nodded. And she drank millions of them yesterday, and the allowance of the two of us is simply not near enough. Lexi frowned. He then began to pace round the room. If they continue to pay their father, then they won't even have a penny to save for themselves. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration in his head. Lexi, why don't we start calling Maria Mommy from tomorrow and behave to her like our mommy? Then we can let Daddy and Maria fall in love. A hint of cunning flashed in Liam's eyes. He nodded. That makes a whole lot of sense. When a man is in love, his IQ will become positive towards the woman. Then he will not think about money. That is it. Lexi snapped his little finger and jumped up excitedly. I'll plan it now. How to make Daddy fall in love with Maria. No. Love Mommy, he corrected himself. "You know I am a master planner," he boasted. Liam looked at his brother, who already went to pick his tablet to start surfing the net with satisfaction. "You have a lot of ideas. Note them down while I go downstairs," Liam said. Liam went to the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. Then she saw the maid standing there looking at Maria while she washing the dishes. She wasn't even using the dishwasher. Liam looked at her and thought she would catch a cold as she is dipping her hands inside water. Not even the hands she injured 5 years ago when it was revealed to Maria that she is not a flare. That is, she is not their biological child, but an adopted one. She then felt guilty and began to do all kinds of rough work and heavy work in the Flare family. At the beginning, Jacob and Sandra would tell her not to do it, that she should leave it to their maids. But later, the Flare family simply did not even invite the maids anymore, and directly hand them all over to Maria. Since then, she gradually developed the habit of doing house chores seriously every day. Even at times, Sandra would get angry that she didn't do it quickly. "Come here." Liam dragged her out of the kitchen. "How can you let the maids stand behind you while you do their jobs for them? Not to talk of you dipping your hand inside water. You will catch cold," he scolded her. Maria smiled at him. When he saw that Maria didn't have anything to defend herself, he pulled her to the living room and made her to sit down. "Don't drink alcohol in the future. Okay?" Liam looked at Maria with a serious face. He wasn't only telling her this because of his father's expensive wine, but because he saw her as a weak woman. "It is not good for your body." It wasn't good for him, and his brother's wallet either. Maria pursed her lips, a little embarrassed. "Auntie actually doesn't usually drink," she said sheepishly. It was only because she saw Chris and Belinda's open love affair yesterday. Her heart was sour, and she needed to distract herself before she has a heart stop. Thinking of those two people, her mood was instantly terrible. Yet she wore a pretentious smile lightly. "Don't worry, it is all over. I am not going to drink anymore," she said with a stiff smile. Liam folded his arms, and 2 pairs of black eyes which glistened with pity looked at her seriously. "Have you been jilted?" Maria couldn't reply. She didn't know how the little one know that she has been jilted. "It is written all over your face," he answered the question she has in her heart. The little guy's voice was very tender. "Miss Flare, you are married now, and you are still thinking about your ex-boyfriend. That is not really good," Maria quickly denied. She didn't want to look bad in front of this little one that favors her. "No, I don't think about him anymore," Liam sighed. She need to let go her ex-boyfriend so as to fall in love with their father. She is like one who got married to be able to forget her pain. Women who have been jilted will lose interest in other men because they would be scared of another heartbreak. Then how will they get her to fall in love with their father in a short period? Xavier's wife, Chase, does not seem to be a smooth road at all. The little guy stood up and walked upstairs in pity, without another word. "I so am young, and I still have to worry about the love affairs of adults. I am so tired," he said in his heart. After Liam went upstairs, she still wanted to go back to the house chores, but then maids already take over their duty. They wouldn't even let her stay with them. She then had no choice but to return to her room bored. She had to bring out a book she had brought with her and start to read. It wasn't until it was getting dark in the evening that Maria straightened up and went downstairs to start cooking dinner for Liam and her husband. She didn't know if he would want to eat her food with the way she had reacted to him the first day. As soon as she got downstairs, she saw the little guy standing at the doorway in sportswear and was putting on his shoes. One of the maids was standing by him. Seeing her, Liam raised his hand and waved at her. Maria then moved closer to him. "Where is this little prince heading to?" she asked with a sweet smile. 5 to 6 o'clock is the time for me to go for a walk." "Oh, what a sporty prince," she joked. Do you want to go with me? I am not going. Maria shook her head and smiled. I'll stay to make you food so that you won't come back to an empty pot. Liam looked at her. She wasn't acting as if they don't eat before she came, but then he liked the feeling of knowing someone truly cares aside his father and their butler. The little guy nodded and moved forward gracefully. Then the maid beside him pushed the door open and they both left. The temperament of the little one was quite arrogant, not like a 5-year-old child. Maria sighed while going to the kitchen to cook. Unlike the first time she entered the kitchen, it was now fully stocked with food recipes. This gladdens Maria's heart. She loved to feed people. She believes that once a man fills his stomach, all other troubles can be averted. She noticed there was shrimps in the kitchen. She didn't notice it in the morning, being that she was in a hurry to cook Liam breakfast, and the cook was the one who made lunch. Looking at the fully loaded kitchen, she was glad that she was going to make a good meal for Liam. Maria was busy making series of delicious meal. The cook was beside her helping her while the maids stood there watching them. Maria already dismissed them, but then they wouldn't leave. She was really happy as she made the dishes. This is the only thing that makes her happy and truly take her mind away from her Chrissy. The delicious aroma of the food being cooked downstairs rushed straight upstairs and into the nose of Lexi, who was still busy with the plan. He closed the love guide page he was reading online. He then went to open the door, and aroma rushed in. Being Lexi, he followed the aroma downstairs. His saliva was almost dropping to the floor. He can't stand it anymore. He wanted to taste whatever was giving sure, tempting aroma. He was almost downstairs before he remembered something. Maria hasn't known that they were twins, and Liam has gone for a walk. He do wear his sportswear whenever he is going for a walk. This made him to quickly run back upstairs, and to their wardrobe found the same sportswear as his brother and put it on. And quickly went downstairs as if the food was going to run away. What a tempting aroma! I am sure this is going to be super delicious, Lexi said happily. Lexi, not waiting, quickly went to sit at the dining room waiting to be served. Maria, who was serving dishes on the table with the maids, looked at the Liam in front of her, a bit confused. If I see that right, he came down from the stairs, she said to herself. She had seen Liam exit the door earlier and hadn't heard him come in, and now he is coming from upstairs with another character. Did he misunderstand something? She soliloquized. She couldn't explain to the butler because he had hurried away. She then shrugs. Sitting on the sofa, she watched a comedy movie while waiting for her husband to return. The movie is very funny, and Maria's mood has gradually improved, until she saw the man in the morning open the door and come in. Maria's heart suddenly sounded alarm. She got scared that he would come to expose what had happened between them to her new family. "WW, why are you here again?" she stuttered. Her husband will soon return. Him being here is very dangerous for her. She didn't even know what is he doing here at this time of the day. And more, he seemed to have the password to the door. The man in a straight suit was gracefully unbuttoned his suit. He then said with his voice cold, "Then, I should ask you, whose house is this? And why are you here?" Maria frowned. The unknown man even has the right to question her in her husband's house. Well, she decided to tell him since she is just newly wedded to the man, and many wouldn't know her since no one was included in their wedding. "This is the home of Xavier McCarthy, and I am the newly wedded wife of Xavier McCarthy. Of course I will be here." After proudly saying that, she then have the thought that at least that her introduction would make the stranger leave her alone. She looked at him, deciding to know the guy before he leaves. "What about you? Who are you?" The man casually hung his suit jacket on the coat rack and looked at her indifferently. "Since you don't know the husband you got married to, I'll help with that. I am Xavier McCarthy." The air in the living room was instantly quiet. Maria looked at the handsome man in front of her in shock, and his eyes were full of confusion. Is he Xavier McCarthy? It was impossible. She had obviously seen Xavier that night. He looks horrible and terrifying, exactly like the rumors. This one standing here must be an imposter. Maria brought out her phone and quickly did a Google search. She didn't want to be deceived by anyone anymore. President Xavier McCarthy, before the fire accident. Then her result came. His very handsome-looking face popped up. She looked at the tall, handsome man before her and then back to her phone. She then got shocked. It was the same. In fact, he is looking more handsome. Then, she was so confounded that she just opened her mouth, not knowing the right words that should come out of it. Xavier waited patiently, watching the woman to do her confirmation. After she did and opened her mouth, probably seeing through the woman's thoughts, Xavier gracefully walked to the sofa and sat down. What you saw that night was the prank from Lexi, he said. Lot of thoughts were flowing into stunned Maria's head. Was it Lexi that night? She looked up at the man in front of her, and her eyes were full of surprise. In the morning she was so flustered that she didn't look closely at all. Now looking at his face outlined by the cold lines, she finally understood that it was no wonder that the Liam and Lexi looked so handsome. It turned out to be genetic. They are their father's replica. So? The woman's voice trembled in shock. You weren't disfigured by that fire 5 years ago. Washington high society is popular. 5 years ago, the mighty Xavier McCarthy experienced a fire accident which disfigured him badly. This changed his temperament, and he hardly relate with people. Even Maria heard rumors that he tortured and killed 2 fiancés. She was really prepared for what is coming to her from burnt Xavier. But now, this cold and indifferent man in front of her made her unable to associate him with the rumored President Xavier. The woman's stunning gaze made Xavier frown slightly. He didn't see reasons why she should be this stunned. Shouldn't she think that he is rich and can buy himself a skin if he wished to? He looked at her coldly. Lexi said you prepared dinner for me. In fact, Xavier originally had an official dinner tonight. But the 2 little naughty kids in the family forced him to come back home. Liam hacked into his system and emailed his partner with his account to cancel the dinner because of family urgency. She had complained that it has been years she saw him, and now he is canceling again, but Liam just said, I am not coming. Lexi, on the other hand, called their grandfather and reported that their father had not cultivated a relationship with his new wife. The housekeeper and the old man took turns bombarding Xavier with calls, saying that his newlywed wife was obsessively preparing dinner and waiting for him to come home. Xavier but then didn't have a choice but to return home. Their nagging didn't even make him remember that he has a dinner date with someone else. He just want to get those people off their back. As soon as he entered the door, the woman who was obsessed with waiting for him in the legend did not even know that he was her husband. What a lie! Dinner? Maria was embarrassed and quickly got up to go to the kitchen. She didn't even think her husband would want to have her cook for him. Haven't you eaten yet? She was so anxious. The food she prepared was for just only her and Liam, who she thought had a large appetite, and then after she found out that they were 2. She quickly ran to the kitchen to see if she could quickly prepare him something nice. She opened the refrigerator, looked at the few ingredients in it. She then went back to ask what he'd eat, but she met him already seated at the dining room. Do you eat noodles? The man's eyebrows rose. Didn't prepare me? There was a hint of displeasure in his low, indifferent voice. Maria bit her lip, knowing that he must have felt that she was incompetent as a wife. She wasn't so pleased with herself. The woman paused, and while moving sharply to prepare the ingredients, she timidly said, I don't know when you are going to return, and I don't want you to eat leftovers. So I want to make you a fresh food. After saying that, She turned her head and looked at him with a smile. It seems like her bribe. After all, you are in my heart, and you are different from others, she coerced. When Maria smiled, a pair of shining eyes bent into a crescent moon, which was extremely cute. Xavier looked at the woman who was trying to trick him. He chuckled. She looked so cute to him. He wasn't even blaming her for not preparing him dinner. He was just angry at those liars who were disturbing him that he had dinner at home. He didn't know why. This time they all ganged up to make sure he is with his wife. Looking at her cook from where he was, this woman seemed quite similar with his two little ones. When she laughed, she was as brilliant as a star, dazzling like a small sun. Looking at her like this, he couldn't say any more harsh words to her. The man stood up and went to the living room. He saw what she was watching. Since he doesn't have interest, he muted the television and began to work with his cell phone. Opening his phone, he saw a series of messages from his intended dinner date. He gritted his teeth knowing that it is his son's handwork. He, a cold man, ignored all the messages and continued to read other business mail. Maria in the kitchen breathed a sigh of relief. Starting tomorrow, she will put the matter of cooking for her husband into consideration. She would start her wife duties. As she cooked, she couldn't stop thinking at how handsome her husband is. If Kathy had known that Xavier wasn't destroyed as said, she wouldn't have pushed her to go marry him. She didn't know if she should be happy or sad because there is still the rumor about him killing his fiancée. 10 minutes later, a steaming bowl of egg noodles was ready. She was quite ashamed that she was serving her husband for the first time, and it was a bowl of noodles. She was quite nervous at what he is going to say. President Xavier, it is time to eat.